Hey Internet! Today I'm going to talk to you guys about Carcassonne Hills and Sheep, the 9th boxed expansion for everybody's favorite pastoral tile-laying game, now with even more pastoralness. Look at that. You got some sheep herding going on, you got some hills in the background. It's lovely. It's just a lovely countryside, and that's what you'll be building in Carcassonne Hills and Sheep, although you'll probably be very spiteful to other people while you're doing it. The first thing this expansion adds is hills. Here you can see such a hill. It's got a nice little Gulf flag on top of it to make sure that you see what's going on there. And the way that these work is, any meeple that is placed on a tile containing a hill is going to break ties, essentially. So, if I put a meeple in that city up there, and I place this tile down, it's going to take 2 meeples before anybody can take it away from me. So basically no one's going to be able to tie me. If someone else gets in there with 1 meeple, I still win, which is lovely for me. Now this actual symbol on here isn't so easy to tell from far away, so what they've done, and this is something that's going to make so many people I know really, really upset, which I actually like quite a lot. When you place a hill tile, you take another tile out of the bag, shove it under there, and now that's A, very visibly a hill, and B, some tiles not in the game anymore. So that adds a little bit of uncertainty back to the game for people that either have played it on iOS too much, where it tells you everything about all the tiles that are left in the game, or who are amazing card counters and would be better served spending their time at Vegas, I guess, than playing Carcassonne with me. But yeah, so it adds a little bit more uncertainty. You're never sure if any of those tiles are actually going to be in the game, because they could be stuffed underneath a hill somewhere on the board, just to spite you, which is something else. So the next thing that this game has is the sheep. And if you've got sheep, you will also need a shepherd. Ooh, we have this guy. He's like the regular meeple, only he has a slightly taller hat, and he has a stick that is like the thickness of his whole body, so don't mess with him. What he does is you can place him down on a field instead of placing down a farmer. Then every time that you expand, actually when you place him you get one of these, and every time you expand that field afterward, you can collect one of these lovely sheep. Actually here, so first of all, this is what's in this bag, are these sheep coins, valued between 1 and 4, and of course there's a wolf, which unlike when I actually play this game, I'm having a hard time finding. There he is. That guy. Now these like 18 tiles, I guess, are in here. And this bag is very nearly the size of the bag for every Carcassonne tile ever made. So it's a little bit absurd. Anyway, whenever you expand the farmer's field, the farmer's the other one. Whenever you expand the shepherd's field, you'll drag one of these out of here and say, oh, 3 sheep. Oh, next time. Ooh, 1 more sheep. Now, anytime you expand the field, you also have the option of pulling all of those back. So I could score 4 points, but I think I want more points than that. So I'm going to take another tile out. Ooh, 2 more sheep. And you can keep doing that as long as you want until you draw one of the 2 wolves that are in here, at which point all of these go back in the bag, and your shepherd is eaten gruesomely, and you take him off the board. So that's neat because it adds another... Carcassonne already has a little bit of a push your luck feel to it with a lot of the things that are going on. Especially if you have inns and cathedrals in the mix. You tack one of those onto a city or a road, and it's going to be worth a lot more if it ever gets completed, but it also is going to, especially in the case of the cathedrals, it's going to make it harder to complete. Your opponents are going to be expanding it in really awful, miserable ways, making it so it's very, very difficult for you to ever actually close the city off. So this adds another sort of risk-reward element to the gameplay. Another thing that it does that I think is really cool is it makes sure that basically none of your tile draws are ever completely dead. And they're already sort of not in Carcassonne, but there are some that are pretty underwhelming, and with this feature, even if you draw an underwhelming, boring tile, you can usually tack it onto where your farmer is and get a chance at another couple of points that way, which is pretty nice. Continuing along that push your luck theme, we have these vineyards. That's not the best tile to use. I'll use this one. Actually, this is a pretty bizarre tile as well, that little dingly road there. Anyway, vineyards are these little farmland-looking plant squares, And what those do is score you 3 points if they're placed next to a cloister when that cloister is completed. If the cloister is never completed, they don't ever score you anything because the monks are too busy building their building to make wine and celebrate. That's pretty neat. It adds sort of I was mentioning the inns and cathedrals earlier. That's sort of the same feel to cloisters, although it doesn't make them not score. It's just a good chunk of points if you do happen to complete them over the course of the game. And it adds a little bit more thought to, if I place a cloister down, should I just straight ahead complete it, or should I try and hold out to get a couple vineyards placed next to it? There's actually a lot of these. A lot of the tiles in this expansion have the vineyards on them, so you're likely to see a good number of them throughout the game. Lastly, this expansion adds a couple of really bizarre types of tiles. So you have this with a city that ends in the middle of a field, splitting the field into two, and this with a field that ends in the middle of a city, splitting a city into two. And the way that those work, right now that's 2 separate cities, but if I place another thing alongside it, bam, now they're one city, just with one tile. I've fused those. And that adds some pretty interesting plays into the game. This reminds me a little bit of some of the weird tiles from the first 2 expansions, Inns and Cathedrals and Traders and Builders. Like the ones where the cities have like these jutting bridges that jut out above a road or into another city or do all sorts of really bizarre things like that. These create the same kinds of weird situations in your game, but they're just a little bit easier to look at, I guess. It's easier to visually tell what's happening there and not have to sit down and analyze, okay, is that bridge ending in the city or is it going over the city and going another place? So those are pretty cool. So this expansion does what I think a good expansion should. It expands on the stuff that the base game already does well and makes up for a couple of flaws or shortcomings in the original game. Carcassonne adds this sheep bag and the shepherd to take care of some of the dull late game draws, that even mid game draws that might happen when you just get a tile that's not super useful. You've pretty much always got a good way to use it now, as opposed to something that's kind of half-hearted. It adds a little bit more interesting gameplay to the cloisters, which didn't have that much going on surrounding them beforehand. Adds a couple new interesting tiles, and allows for a little bit more uncertainty to be in the game once you've played the base game, or however many expansions you might already have for it, out. Add this in, and it will remove tiles from your game throughout, so you're never able to really get a good handle on what's left in the game. So this expansion is going to be stuck into my Carcassonne box. I'm just going to leave it there. I think it's really good. It doesn't add a lot of mechanical complexity. It doesn't add a lot of new meeples with little fiddly rules people have to keep track of, or really any kind of new complex way of scoring. The sheep, you just score a point per sheep that you have. So that's pretty simple. Nothing's moving around the board in all kinds of crazy ways. You're not putting stuff back on and taking it back off. The crazy barn, or you don't have these modifiers or meeples that are barely different from other meeples that score differently. So I think this is actually one of my favorite expansions of the game, and I'll play with it pretty much all the time. Inns and Cathedrals and Traders and Builders are my other 2 favorite expansions. I like the Inns and Cathedrals mechanism of kind of all or nothing, put this down on a thing that you're trying to construct. And I like the Traders and Builders added some incentive for other players to complete stuff that they're not even involved in, even though the scoring chips that were used for that were a little bit weird. I also have played with a few of the other expansions. Princess and Dragon was confrontational in a way that didn't seem to suit Carcassonne to me. Abbey and Mare, I like the Abbey tile a lot, but the other stuff that added in seemed kind of crazy, and I really didn't like the way that the barn worked, especially because you ended up in situations where you would connect things to the board and pull them back off, and then put another guy down and connect them to the board and pull them back off again. You could rack up a lot of points that way, but who knows why that's happening. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this is definitely one of my top 3 expansions. If you've played the base game to the point where you're kind of memorized the tile mix, I guess, and you have gotten accustomed to knowing what's going to come out, and you think that's a bad thing, adding this expansion first might be a really good idea. Otherwise, I think I would still say go for Traders and Builders and Inns and Cathedrals before this one, but this is definitely the next on the list after that if you're going to get some more expansions for Carcassonne. Which you should, because Carcassonne's a pretty good game and plays pretty quick, and everybody should like it because it's nice. It's a nice game. It's mean, but still nice. I don't know. You know what I'm going for. Anyway, Carcassonne, Hills and Sheep. Check it out.